So, welcome everyone for this second book launch of the Developmental Practitioner. I'm very honored to have such a broad audience today. Uh, and let me introduce you by starting. Why did I write this book? Uh, And I think it's an experience that all of you share from time to time, namely that I'm often I haven't met any clients over the past years which haven't had a moment where they said, we've tried everything here, and the problem keeps coming back. Well, it's at that moment that the issue is no longer technical, it's developmental. And this book is written for that moment. The book aims at giving an alternative way of looking at issues, an alternative way of exploring possible solutions. The developmental approach is an approach that can be added, is complementary, and enriches almost every other approach that I know of, whether it will be lean, agile, or other methodologies. uh, the developmental angle always creates a unique added value. And why did I write the book now? It starts with an observation that I have that there is a crisis of thinking, or you could even say there is an absence of thinking. When I see my grandchildren making a picture, and later in the day or the day after, I'm at a board meeting where all kinds of key performance indicators are discussed, I sometimes have the impression that there is much more thinking put in the child's picture than thinking happening in the boardroom, discussing all the kind of key indicators. Uh, and it let me ask the question, well, when did we begin confusing information and reporting, which is on the right here on the screen, with thinking? Uh, and that absence of thinking is everywhere. It's in how we talk about artificial intelligence. Some say it's authoritarian intelligence because it enables the conditions for people not to think anymore. Uh, what I observe is a lot of polarization, of fragmentation, of talent mismatch, and leadership fatigue. If you look at even the Gallup data of the actively disengaged people working in organizations, what you see is that that percentage increases year over year over year. And well, Otto Laske, when I met him about 20 years ago, he opened a window for me that helped me to look at things differently. And he spent his years of work on one missing ingredient, the shape of human thinking itself. What kind of reading experience can you expect when you will open the book? And there is a number of things that I aimed for. And the first thing was to bring a developmental journey, the journey of Otto's work. I wanted to capture his evolution and how his basic methodology, the Constructive Development Framework, emerged from his life experiences. But it's much more than a developmental journey. It's a blend of a biography and a methodology. So I did not want to limit myself and tell the story of Otto's evolution in his thinking. I also wanted to share a very low threshold introduction into his work at a level that it can be immediately practically used. So each chapter is also practice oriented. It ends with insights directly applicable in consulting, in coaching, and in organizational developmental work. The book is also an invitation for a new way of seeing. The book helps you listen developmentally and recognize deeper patterns in human systems. Developmental listening is basically the core of Otto's book. Uh, and it's much more than a mindset. And that's what I'm trying to explain also in the book. But you can read it more than once. I let it read by 9 colleagues before finishing the text, and they all said, well, gosh, this is something I can read multiple times. So I hope for many readers that it can serve as a guide that expands their capacity to work with complexity. Now, let me start by standing still at a few moments in Otto Laske's journey. And in the first half of the book, I'm spending one chapter per phase of his life. And Otto started his career in the Frankfurt Schule. The Frankfurt Schule is one of the most significant philosophical institutions we have in Germany. It produced thinkers like Hannah Arendt, which was a student of Horkheimer, of Marcuse, who wrote The One-Dimensional Man, and the two basic founding fathers, Adorno and Horkheimer, they were exponents of the Second World War. They asked the question, how is it possible that people stopped thinking and that a totalitarian regime started to emerge? It's there where Otto kind of experienced that thinking can be and is an active process. The Frankfurt Schule refused the closure of thinking, by which they mean that, well, thinking is never finished. Negative dialectics is really about holding the contradiction, holding the tensions, and in holding them, getting a richer picture of the complexity that we're all confronted with. For practice, what does that mean? It means that in whatever position you function, you can treat contradictions as diagnostic data. A contradiction is not something that needs to be avoided, but that it is kind of a bridge to stay with the problem. And you must avoid following the ideas of the Frankfurter Schule to jump to conclusions, to jump to a goal setting too fast. So instead of resolving issues that you're presented with or that you experience, the invitation here is to explore the tension because they reveal the system's edges and the unstated assumptions. At that time, there was no real methodology, but that's what drove Otto later in his life to look for a methodology that enables us to stay with the tensions and frictions. And a second practice insight is that we are dominated by data-driven conversations, and we have at each moment the free choice to replace them by thinking-driven ones. As I started this talk with, even OD interventions, they often start with dashboards, with KPIs, with reports, but the fundamental transformation comes when team shifts from reporting on the system to thinking about the system. Uh, and from time to time, I start a session with the question, what is here the thinking behind the data? What is the thinking behind the sentences that are put on the PowerPoint? And this often changes the level of work immediately. Second practice insight in Otto's journey is his period as a composer. Adorno, one of his first teachers, was also a musician, and Otto was also a musician. After he fled Eastern Germany, he deepened his composer abilities in Utrecht. So he stayed a few years in Holland before moving to the United States and becoming a professor of musicology at the University of Pittsburgh. What he did, he was not just a musician. His basic interest was in listening to what happens when a musician starts to make an interpretation of a score. So he was basically interested in uh, what happens when someone makes an interpretation of a piece of music. And simultaneously, he studied computer science and went very deep into electronic music. Uh, and what fascinated him was that there was a structure in how you could make interpretations of music. And that kind of laid the seed for dialectical listening. He started to listen to the structure of music while other musicians kept on listening to the notes. And his basic insight was music is much more than notes. It's also silence. It's also rhythm. It's so much more than notes. You can start observing the structure through which a musician makes an interpretation of music. And well, his deep dive in music uh, kept on ongoing throughout his life. But in order to make a living, he also had jobs at Arthur D. Little. Well, where he became an assessor of potential. And instead of just going into assessments of personality, which were very popular at that time, he started to get fascinated by the thinking. What what is the thinking that someone unfolds? And he started to consider thought as an observable process, something that was also present in the thinking of Herbert Simon at that time, a famous economist. Now, what does that mean for practice? For practice, that means that you can listen for movement. Uh, so when you are in a dialogue with someone, instead of capturing what they say, you can track how their thinking moves, not only forward, backwards, uh, what one opens, what one closes, what one differentiates or integrates. And often, when forward and backward moments in thinking appear, that reveals developmental constraints that shape their decisions. It sets something about what one person can think about at that moment, and it also reveals what he or she is not thinking about at that moment. So, dialectical listening or developmental listening is listening kind of through the lines of what is happening. And a second practice insight is that written tempo, well, you can use them as signals of shifting underlying thoughts or new thoughts that are emerging. The third step in his journey, and I must apologize that I'm now a bit oversimplifying because in the book I'm trying to also capture the richness of Otto's evolution. Uh, he came in touch with Harvard and he started his second doctoral thesis. So he has a doctoral thesis at the Frankfurter Schule. He went very deep in musicology, uh, did nowadays we would say a master's in computer engineering, and then he came in touch with Harvard, and in Harvard with uh, Keegan as his teacher. And well, in his Harvard period, he became conscious that development is quite more complex than they used to think to at the time. At the time, development was development of personality and intelligence, and there was kind of an idea that we stopped developing when we reached adulthood. Uh, at that time in Harvard, well, the thinking grew that development is something that lasts and continues over adulthood, and it's much more complex than just looking at intelligence or at personality. And the first dimension they looked at was the emotional development, how people express and navigate their inner and interpersonal world. It's kind of the discovery of development as a subject object transition, by which I mean that development is characterized by the ability to take a broader and broader meta perspective on yourself and uh, enlarge the choices that you have. The essence of development is that, well, you're able to transcend your ego, and that occurs through predictable phases. And those phases are described in the book. But there is also a second dimension, the cognitive development dimension, which is about the structural maturity of the thinking. And there he was highly inspired by Bassages, which at the time was also a colleague professor at Harvard. Bassages noticed, especially in school environments, uh, that there is something as a changing structure of the thinking when you look at how students develop and what the outcomes of school performance can, what predicts the outcomes of school performance. And there is a third dimension, the psychological dimension. And at the time you had McClelland, uh, who built upon an approach that looked at the motivational and the situational pressures shaping the behaviors, the needs and the presses that you need to capture in order to understand how development occurs. What does that mean for practice? Well, uh, perhaps the most fundamental insight is that you must try to look at what your client is subject to, what your client is not able to take as an object of reflection. And that can be their own personality, own behavioral patterns, ways of interacting with others. Uh, the essential insight there is that when people cannot see a pattern, they are subject to it. And as a team coach, as a leader, as a manager, or as a consultant, you should look at how the situation is shaping the person rather than the person shaping the situation. And the situation we are talking about here is the situation in one's head, not things that occur over there, but the situation in your head that is shaping you, that determines your unexamined assumptions, for example. The moment you start touching that issue, you start to create transformative openings in leadership and in team coaching. A second insight here is that you can coach the structure of the story, not the story itself. And many issues in companies are complex. And we build kind of rather simplified stories around it. But the thought structures, the way you kind of, the structures in which the stories are embedded, for example, a story that highlights the functional dimensions of an issue, when you start listening to the structure, you start seeing that each dimension that is used lacks an insight in how each separate dimension, for example, has evolved, or what are the critical relationships between the dimensions. So that second practice insight is the invitation to build a discipline of mapping a client's sense and meaning making before you start an intervention. And it brings me to the fourth act in Otto's journey. It's the founding of the Interdevelopmental Institute, where he started teaching people to listen developmentally. And he developed a kind of a gateway program. I had the honor and opportunity to participate in the cohort of 2005, so now 20 years ago. And well, in order to help people listen developmentally, he helped his students listening to the meaning making, sense making, and the psychological dimensions that determine their internal conversations, their frame of reference. And a distinction he always makes is the one between vertical development and horizontal development. Vertical development that refers to a shift in the structure of thinking itself. It's a transformation in how one perceives reality, makes an interpretation, and integrates kind of complexity. It's it is about a person's capacity for perspective taking, for systemic insight, and for self reflection. While horizontal development refers to a more tool-oriented approach, adding more tools to existing ways of thinking. Uh, its practice looks like acquiring new skills, new methodologies, new techniques that enable someone to master the situation from the perspective he is either subject on or can reflect upon. You could say that vertical development uh, changes the builder and not the toolbox, while horizontal development changes the toolbox but not the builder. Most HR programs in companies are built on a horizontal developmental angle. The basic question that underpins development programs in companies is uh, offer me a tool to do this or this better. And the irony is that it's labeled as development, but it basically doesn't enable someone to cope with complexity and build a richer perspective and come to more integrated decision making. Uh, the basic insight of Otto's constructive developmental framework is that the three lines of development, meaning making, sense making, and psychological dimensions, they do not develop in parallel. They do not develop simultaneously. Some can be developed faster, and some lack the pace of development. Uh, and so those tensions between the three domains, when you approach them, they kind of are the key ingredient for success in coaching complex leadership issues. Uh, it's in understanding the interrelationship between the three while uh, making a distinction between them that you can change people's mindsets, help them cope with change better, and give them new reasons for action. Uh, the second tension is that those internal conversations are always in tension with expected contribution by others, and that there's a second learning opportunity over there. What are the practice insights linked to his constructive developmental framework? The first one is that developmental listening is by far the fastest path to culture change. When leaders, HR, and teams learn to hear context, to hear process, emerging change, relationship, and transformation, and not just focus on the content, the organization's conversational quality shifts and the culture shifts. So, cultural change uh, is basically a change in how people listen to each other and what they listen for. A second practice insight is that you can use a four lens listening protocol in every intervention. You can train people to track simultaneously the context, That means becoming conscious about what frames the issue, the process, getting insight in what is emerging, what is decaying, a relationship, what elements co-shape each other, and what is trying to change. And that angle prevents superficial problem solving and fosters systemic insight. Perhaps a brief application. I often come in situations where a team disagrees, for example, on launching a product. Uh, and if one person insists on gathering more data, one on intuition and one on urgency, uh, the question that always leads my attention is what is the one thing that in that situation is not mentioned that nevertheless shapes the situation completely? And a product launch, for example, is embedded in a context. So you need to understand the bigger context to understand the thinking about that particular product launch. Uh, Understanding the bigger context are the dimensions, the boundaries, and the assumptions that were taken in the past or in that situation. The second line of listening is that you can listen for the movement, for the evolution. How is our thinking about launching a product evolved in the past years? Instead of looking at a product launch as a snapshot, you can listen for and ask questions to understand what is unfolding here that hasn't been named at a particular moment. The third dimension of launching a product, and I'm now using the concept of launching a product, but you can use any concept that at a particular moment starts to dominate the dialogue. The third dimension is the question, how do things co-shape each other? Uh, if we talk about launching a product, what is the critical relationship with other things that are happening in the organization or outside of the organization? Understanding the critical relationship with product launches done by competitors can shift the dialogue immediately. So the third dimension is about how are the elements influencing each other's in ways we did not see, we did not discuss beforehand. And the fourth class of thought forms is the question, what is becoming here? What is the possible breakdown? What are the turning points? And what is the potential linked to that turning point? Because the limits, the possible breakdowns, uh, they tell us something about what is it that is trying to change here. So it's a kind of absent but implied exercise that you can do in every situation. It's uh, it's not simple to learn it, but once you understood it, it really increases your intervention capability by 200 to 300%. The fifth act in Otto's journey is when he kind of shifted from CDF as a kind of a toolbox to CDF as a developmental epistemology. It's about the ontology of becoming. It's the ontology of becoming it's a bit, it's a summary to point to a shift where he started to see people, organizations, and systems not as fixed things, but as ongoing processes of transformation. Instead of asking, what is this? He started to ask, what is this becoming and through which tensions, which forces, and which potentials is it emerging? Uh, it's He has been influenced by authors such as Simenon, McGilchrist, Stiegler, and they all have in common that they said, well, if you look at development as a series of phases, as something that is predictable, your developmental theory is incomplete. You need to see development as individuation, not as stage progression. And seeing development as individuation means that it is something that unfolds through the contradictions, not as a neat sequence of stages, but as something that you need to address and work upon. Uh, his main observation was that many people run away from tensions, from restrictions that they have, and they kind of accept uh, functioning and operating in suboptimal conditions. But that suboptimal condition tells you something about uh, where you start to get ready for your next developmental step. In practice insight, translated in practice insight, that means that there is always an invitation to treat organizations as a living individuation process. Organizations, they evolve through tensions. They do not evolve through plans. Uh, and what helps is asking the question, what identity is the system growing out? What is the new identity that is emerging? What are the contradictions that fuel the transition? And this informs transformation far better than maturity models or project management models or planning models or whatever. The second practice inside is that you can map the developmental pressures. So instead of assessing what the organization lacks, you can examine everything that puts that organization under uh, pressure. And well, the simple but yet very powerful question is, what does that tell me about what this organization is trying to become? Uh, and that depth of dialogue, that depth of discussion is often lacking in teams at all levels in the organization. The second part of the book brings to the foreground a number of provocations. The first one is that developmental theory is incomplete and we need a developmental epistemology. So not just a developmental psychology. Traditional epistemology asks, how do we know whether something is true? But the developmental epistemology asks the question, how does our way of knowing grow over time? And what new realities become visible as it grows? Uh, a second provocation is that the real crisis we are confronted with is not a climate crisis or an AI crisis, but it's a crisis of thinking. And at the background of in the background of this provocation, or this provocation goes back to the experience that most adults operate with only 4 to 7 out of the 28 dialectical thought structures that Otto distinguished, and that the world requires at least 14. Uh, it's my experience in companies that if I can increase the number of thought structures used in a group, that problems are solved in half of the time, and the rework is decreased enormously. So it's really about the quality of the decision making in line with the breadth and the depth of thinking. A third provocation is that organizations are not machines, but they are conversations. And human systems don't fail because of poor decisions, but they fail because of unexamined assumptions. Those three provocations form the basis of uh, uh, a number of chapters that go deeper into a number of subjects, like what does it mean for systemic work that we are doing? Uh, a lot of systemic work is becoming very popular nowadays, but systemic work uh, well, helps you identify all the dimensions present in a situation, in a problem, or in a possible solution path. CDF helps you how people think about those systems and not just how systems are designed. Uh, Systems thinking nowadays is very much focused on what plays a role here, but kind of neglects the question how uh, how has the selection of dimensions that we have in consideration, how did that emerge? And Otto's work helps practitioners seeing or perceiving the dynamics, the tensions, and the emergent patterns. It also surfaces the hidden dimensions and the architecture of problems, because you start to listen to what is absent but implied in complex situations. It enables you also to work across boundaries and redefine culture, roles, relationships, and environment, and especially come to a new process of strategy uh, integration. And in practice, basically, it comes down to the ability to make better diagnosis, fewer false solutions, and a deeper grasp of the organization as a living system. A second chapter is about how do we need to rethink our relationship with AI. Because AI reveals the limits of our current thinking. AI becomes a tool, and the tool becomes more important than our own sense and meaning making. Uh, Developmental insight helps people understand how they can relate to AI, not only relate to AI, but helps them use AI even better, because the developmental approach offers a meta perspective to build a relationship with AI. The developmental question that comes to the foreground here is, what is it that AI can take over, but where must human judgment deepen? And if you start thinking about that question, you come up with another criteria set that enables you to design the next AI application. Uh, and I already have students doing that. Uh, you can build in critical evaluation of AI outputs. You can build in ethics. You can build even in where there are blind spots. And so this means when you add developmental thinking into AI can even become a catalyst for developing more mature, reflective forms of human agency, while currently the focus is too much on using AI as a toolkit and not question anymore the output provided by AI. I also spend a chapter on dialectical citizenship because the developmental insights open up a new horizon to develop citizenship and to engage in politics in a different way, moving away from polarized thinking. You can train citizens to hold contradictions without collapsing them. I was able to do that in architectural programs, making new master planning for regions through large-scale participation processes. The examples are also in the book. You can see citizenship as perspective taking. In Denmark, there are a number of initiatives opening that path, and they are very successful. So it invites citizens to take systemic responsibility. So that means not only engaging from identity or ideology, but from an awareness of how things are interdependent and how things emerge. What are the longer term consequences of what is currently decided? So it offers a possibility to build more generative public dialogue and evolve towards deeper democratic capacity. It's an orientation towards what I define as societal becoming rather than winning on arguments. So those three themes were kind of have an early presence in the blogs that Otto wrote over the last 5 years, but kind of never came to a workout. What I tried to do in the book is integrate them into a coherent view on how we can handle certain contemporary themes better. What this book contributes, and the book has 210 pages. It's available on most online bookshops worldwide. So you just need to look at your familiar bookshop. And the guide price is 45 US dollars. In ebook, it's $18. And you can buy a signed copy on my own website. I will, if there are books bought through my own website, they will all be posted tomorrow. But the book contributes, what the book contributes is that, well, it's the first full-scale integration of Otto's intellectual biography of his developmental methodology and his practical impact. It presents CDF also as a living practice, not as a set of tools. There are many examples in the book that brings it alive, and the book is deliberately written in a narrative style. The book emphasizes dialectical listening, and each chapter has also exercises that enables you to practice dialectical listening for yourself. It extends Otto's framework into the domains that I just mentioned. So chapters on governance, on AI-shaped sense-making, on dialogical organizations, and how CDF can guide practice in those environments. These are themes that Otto was beginning to explore and that I'm trying to bring to a new synthesis. And finally, it's written for practitioners. Throughout the book, readers will find questions, illustrative cases, thought form analysis. There is a large case study in the first annex. There is an annex which describes the thought forms in a very, very practical way. And there are reflective exercises. So it enables you to approach complexity in a different way. It makes his insights accessible without simplifying the essence. And what I'm personally have in mind for the first half year is that I will create a number of developmental dialogue labs. These consist of 4 sessions online, and they will address contemporary topics, and we will use those topics to deepen the CDF lens. So the purpose of the developmental lab is multiple. It's about using CDF in real conversations that we have. So it's not my intention to give lectures, but it's my intention to really build the practical skill in dialectical thinking through dialogue. So I will use a very Oxfordian style of sharing the notes, the preparations, demanding that you go through them, and that we have a real deep dialogue on them, fostering your own qualities to engage in dialectical developmental dialogue with others, whether it are working situations, coaching situations, or other situations. I have already 3 themes in mind, but they can be broader about strategy and complexity. I'm currently applying the insights in a large-scale breakthrough strategy formulation process within a company and broadened it to the sector. I've been involved in human capital process design, where I can bring to the foreground some really interesting cases. And I have built an AI strategy tool together with Guy Mertens, which learned me a lot about how I can relate with HI differently. And so throughout the program, you will practice a number of things. The key idea is well, to shift further your mindset and enable you to deal with complexity differently. It's my intention, depending on the level of interest, to differentiate the developmental lab for the United States, for Europe, and for Asia Pacific, depending on how many people are interested. Uh, each session will take 2 hours, and by differentiating, I can better take into account the time that you can attend to the developmental dialogue labs. This brings me to well, the end of the presentation, but if there are questions and you have probably questions, I still have some time to respond to them, but do not feel obliged to stay. I announced the session would take about an hour, but we can explore in the next 15 minutes some questions that might have popped up while listening. Any questions?
Yeah, Jan, thank you very much. That was really interesting. I'm not familiar with CDF, but I am familiar with vertical development theory, and the work that I do, we do look at organizations as human systems, and the founders of our organization were trained in Gestalt, and so we use Gestalt
Mhm.
theory very much as a kind of a foundational way of how we work. What I was thinking was, it seems very cognitively orientated, and I was wondering about the influence of McGill-Christ around the master and his emissary, and the kind of the left brain around logic and language and meaning making, as opposed to the right brain being more embodied, more connected, more relational, more humanistic. And I guess I'm just wondering what's the influence of McGill-Christ's work on the framework, and is there does it include things like embodied practice?
Uh, I spend a subchapter on the influence of McGill-Christ on Otto's thinking, and some 8 years ago, he wrote an article which he submitted on the left brain, right brain angle of McGill-Christ, and how the CDF would enrich that perspective. That article has never been published, but I have well, kind of made a summary of that article and integrated it in the book. And in his latest thinking, Otto started to make a distinction between the dialectical thought forms, which are left brain related, and the creative thought forms, which are right hemisphere related. And he shared some insights about that in the first session of this book launch last Tuesday, and is now working at an article on it. So I hope to share it with everyone who registered. It's not yet fully captured in the book, but his ideas on the ontology of becoming uh, moved him far away from the purely cognitive or social emotional point of view of development.
And maybe just a follow-up question, Jan, in terms of the idea of kind of systems within systems and parts and wholes, like
Mhm.
there's that you got to make a decision at some point as to where you're kind of interacting with the system, and so I'm not really clear my question, but like if I'm working with, let's say, an executive team, I can work with them at an individual level, and I can work with each of the individuals with the parts of themselves that might be in contradiction, or I could work with, the team as a whole and the contradictions that the team holds, or I could work at the level of that team as part of a bigger set of teams, which is part of another big whole, which is part of another big whole. And I'm just curious as to, does the CDF provide any guidance around that, or what it would say about that in terms of
Well,
where you would offer an interaction or an
the key
intervention?
of the CDF is basically set of questions and angles that helps you determine what boundaries do I choose. Because you can approach an issue as an individual while it isn't an individual at that proper moment in time. So many coaches, individual, treat issues held by individuals as individual issues. And the key of CDF is that it helps you assess very rigorously what boundaries to take into account and which boundary approach will have the highest leverage in solving the issue or coping with the complexity present in that situation.
Mhm.
So the parts whole angle is linked to the contextual thought forms, but often systems thinkers do not make a difference between the different sub thought forms that can be distinguished in that. Many systems theories also limit themselves to 4 to 5, 6 thought forms, not more. If you
Mhm.
look, for example, at systems dynamics, yeah, there is a limited number of thought forms in it. If you look at soft systems methodology, it's built on 3 thought forms. If you look at hard systems methodologies, it's built on uh, 4 thought forms. If you look at the viable systems model, it's built also on 3 to 5 thought forms. Uh, and so Otto's approach distinguishes 28 of them. So it always enriches the approach that you already have. So it's not a question, is your approach uh, the best or not the best? No, it's a methodology that enables you to enrich your own approach and become a better developmental practitioner. Does
And
that
is
answer?
when you say a developmental practitioner, are you talking about the development of an individual or the development of a system?
What's the difference? As an individual is a system, and that individual is always part of other systems, which are in their part also part of other systems. So a systemic angle is an angle that helps you see the complexity, and the
Mhm.
complexity that is the bigger picture, how it emerged, what the critical relationships are, and what the possible limits, breakdowns, and potentials are in the context, the emerging change, and the interrelationships. That's basically a systemic approach. And if
Yeah,
you,
well, I guess I was interested in the idea of individuation. You were talking about, like there's an
Mhm.
orientation towards individuation, and I was wondering, is that the individuation of individuals within a system, or is that the individuation of a system in terms of what the system's trying to
Well,
become?
each level will have its own tensions and contradictions set. So individuation happens at all levels.
Mhm.
Individuation, if you look at Simondon, he started describing individuation processes in nature, in physics,
Mm.
in quantum physics. And the nature of Simondon's thinking is uh, well, really to surface what accounts for the change of forms. Uh, and that's his work on individuation. So it happens at all levels, except it's not like that in our minds. We we always need boundaries, and the moment we are able to reflect upon how we create the own boundaries, at which point we define something as individual, at which point we define something as a team, or at which point we define something as an issue between teams, or an organizational issue, or an issue between organizations, or in a sector, or between a sector organization and a political situation. Well, the invitation of Otto is the ability to start thinking about how you created the thinking while you were thinking, and what you're not thinking about while you are thinking. That's
Mhm.
basically the invitation.
Can
But
I
I can understand that when I put it like that, it could be difficult. But
can
are
I
there any other
can I
questions?
pick up on a
Yeah.
point, Jan? I've really enjoyed this. I've waded my way through Otto's big books on CDF. I'm not sure I use it explicitly, but it's probably gone in subconsciously. I think. Thank you, Declan, for your question about Ian McGilchrist, because that's been hovering around in my mind as well. And I think, Jan, you're explicitly saying that the dialectical thought forms are left hemispheric is very helpful. Um, in your experience, my question is kind of linked to what you were poking at, I think, Declan, partly. To what extent is this way of framing the process of human development correlated with a shift from thinking about what is unfolding at whatever level to recognizing our thinking as an aspect of that unfolding?
Well,
Mm.
I'm not sure I understand your question well, but
Okay,
everything that we are,
thinking
yeah,
about implies a distance. Systems, all this
yes,
complexity is over there, and that it's a radical shift to recognize, whoa, my way of perceiving what's happening
mhm,
here in this flow of being, that those thinking processes are an aspect of the unfolding.
that's correct.
And I kind of sense a distance in the way you're presenting this.
Well, when you are presenting something, it's an output of a reflection process. But of course, the distance itself is subject to my own development. So uh, I tried to stay as close as possible to Otto's voice in the book,
Mhm.
except for the last chapters. There I'm kind of going my own way. Uh, it's the title of the book is Otto Laske's Legacy on Becoming. So I'm trying to capture his legacy and ask myself the question, what does that mean for the issues we are confronted now? And I'm very conscious that it reflects my own developmental position.
Mm.
And probably when I would rewrite the book in 5 or 10 years from now, I would put different things in the book. I would make a different selection. So the total number of pages that I had from Otto amounted up to 4,000 pages. So it's quite a huge library that he wrote. And well, to bring it down to a book of 210 pages, you need a selection. And
Mm.
The only thing that I could do is present that selection to Otto's inner circle. So I shared the manuscript with 9 people whom I respect very highly, like Nick Shannon, Graham Boyd, Ursula Clédière. And they all provided comments. I received about 150 comments on the manuscript and then started to rework it. So also their perspective is partly integrated in the book. But everything that we do, well, is kind of limited by the breadth and the depth of our own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that insight into your process. I think you're doing a great service to the world in reinterpreting what Otto Laske did and is doing.
Yes, and my biggest frustration with the texts that he has written and the books, which are brilliant in the content that they have, but they are not so easy to read. So it took me about 20 years to come to a summary for myself. 13 years, and over those years, I had my own student groups that reflected back to me what I tried to share and where I learned from. And each time that I had an opportunity to invite people to go deeper into Otto's work, for example, with the thought forms, it took me about 5 years before I was able to explain what is that. Yeah. And it took me another 5 years really to put it into practice.
Yeah, and I was wondering, I'm not seeing it naturally. How does the CDF integrate or sit alongside the vertical development aspects of the emotional, social, and the cognitive?
A CDF is the name, the label that Otto put on his methodology. But can you rephrase your question?
Yeah, I'm looking at the 4 thought forms as they sit there, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the vertical development aspects, and I'm just sort of piecing it together in my mind how they all fit together, or did the later work sort of let go of some of the earlier work? I wasn't sure how that all fits together, having not read the book yet.
Well, the later work of Otto takes a more meta perspective. But basically, he invites you to make a distinction between the thought forms, the social emotional, the maturity point of view, the psychological or behavioral point of view, a bit later in his life, also the spiritual point of view, and then the recent insights from, amongst others, Ian McGilchrist, Stiegler, and Simoneau. And they are all points of view. You cannot understand a person through reducing that person as a set of competencies or skills or as a set of thought form classes, because there are many people who lifted out the dialectical thinking part, and the dialectical thinking part is important. It's, in my opinion, the most powerful part of his legacy. But understanding how one operates, how one develops, is much more complex than that. Yeah.
Mm. Because I understand that the social emotional can sit at with stages, and I got the impression that the thought forms were are ways that you could look at and ways that you can deliberately apply in conversations in your own thinking as to how you're approaching a particular situation?
Well, in the beginning of his work, if you read Measuring Hidden Dimensions, he also stipulates the development of the cognitive thought forms in phases.
Hmm.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
moved from a phase approach to a kind of complex interrelationship approach, because also maturity, you can doubt whether that moves in phases.
Yeah, I see. So, and
Yeah.
is that a letting go of the work of, say, Gillian Stamp and John Isaacs and the like in terms of their cognitive development models?
That's indeed a letting go of their work without refusing it, because their work also reflects a way of looking at the development of human beings at that moment in time.
Mm,
Yes.
excellent. Yeah. No,
So
thank you. That makes sense.
and every approach has its value, but you need to uh, see an approach in its historical context too. So Elliot Jacques, Gillian Stamp, and many other systems thinkers, Stefford Beer, Checkland, whatever. Every intellectual approach is built upon the shoulders of others. And when you go deeper into Otto's work, it helps you see how one builds upon others' shoulders. And it helps you see, if you really read their work, uh, what they integrate from others. For example, Keegan integrated a lot of things from Carl Rogers and from Piaget, which we have now forgotten. If we talk about Piaget, there are some 5 to 10 insights from Piaget that we still capture. But the work of Piaget is much richer than that. And when we use AI, all those nuances, all those uh, the development of insight is kind of not captured anymore in AI. You need to go back to the original work to read it.
And yeah, and I think that's where I'm coming from, because like I've trained as a trauma therapist, and there's been a kind of a revolution in trauma over the last 50 years around people like Stephen Porges, like the polyvagal theory, and then Peter Levine in terms of
Mhm.
being able to look at multiple perspectives of how a person makes meaning of their lives, not just from the cognitive, but also from the somatic, particularly from the somatic. And that you can there's practices where you can suspend your meaning making process and stay closer to your somatic experience, and a whole load of new data emerges out of that you wouldn't
Yes.
have had available to you. The difference between implicit and explicit memory. And I guess I'm just curious as to whether all of that new body of knowledge has been integrated or not.
Well, it is now being integrated. The somatic, for example, is one class of creative thought forms. The body awareness is one, but you have uh, a whole set of symbols which are also part of the creative processes. The symbolic, the use of metaphors, for example, is all part of the becoming process, and
Yeah.
it is becoming integrated in now. But there's still a lot of work to do.
Mm, cool.
Well, I'm very interested in reading your book.
Yeah. Are there any questions left? Because I would say let's close the session
Mm.
here. I want to thank you for your presence. If you have any questions that come to your mind while as you read the book, don't hesitate to share them with me through mail, and I will be happy to respond to them. And if you want to participate in a developmental lab, just give a signal. If you want a developmental lab organized for your specific circle of colleagues or fellow practitioners, just give me a signal and I will be happy to look into how we can get things organized. I'm a profound believer in the power of Otto's ideas, and where I'm able to put them into practice, I see also the outcomes. I'm also aware that not every organization is ready for that, but that doesn't disturb me. There are plenty of situations where you can apply them, and it's my invitation to, it is my call to bring it further into the world. So thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you, Jan. I just want to acknowledge that I have 101 questions, but I'll commit to reading your book before I come back with my
come
questions.
back and we will organize a Zoom meeting, the two of us.
Sounds
Okay.
great. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Enjoy
so
the day.
much, Jan. Appreciate all the work that you do. It's brilliant. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah,
So
really great.
enjoy
thank
reading
you.
and yeah, let's meet again in the near future.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And happy holidays.
You too.
Happy holidays.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.